Hello and welcome to Dragon Boat Dynasty, a podcast where I share my experience in building, coaching, and scaling a Dragon Boat team. My name is Sean, and I'm the head coach of Argonaga Dragon Boat team with over 100 active members based in Malaysia. Today, I'm going to share a topic that's very close to my heart with quite big learnings. It's called Leaving Ego Aside. So this story starts right after our Langkawi race. Langkawi was, I think at this point, still the peak of our performance. It was, I think, around our second year. And during that time, we somehow found ourselves in the finals. During that race set, it was in the sea and there were a lot of disturbances. Sea races are usually one of the least fair ones because the water conditions, the pontoon's missing, you have to do a float start and people can cheat around here and there, all kinds of stuff. But in any case, what happened was we managed to secure a second position right behind PIPC. In fact, throughout the entire time, we kind of gave PIPC quite a scare to a point where after the race set, one of them came up to me and he said, if we were given another, let's say 50 meters or so, we would have overtaken them and we would have come out on top. So it was a very good time for us. Our morale was as high as it has ever been. It was the very first time right after the race where Penang Forward, a very, very strong team, came up to us and they started talking to us and they kind of acknowledged our existence, and that feels great. That feels amazing to be on par with these kinds of teams. And our morale was very high and we were outperforming ourselves even in trainings. So in the next season, we were preparing for a race in Singapore, the DBS Marina Regatta. So that was a very huge stage. And we don't expect ourselves to perform very well in the Singapore stage because there were a lot of very competitive teams. But being able to paddle with them once a year allows us to kind of see how big the world is outside of Malaysia and how competitive some teams are outside of Malaysia. So it allows us to strive for greater lengths, greater distances. So we made this one of those competitions that we do once a year. And there was a small little race in Putrajaya that just happened to appear out of nowhere. And the captain at the time, he gave me a chance to lead the team for that coming race. So I had to prepare everyone for this race. And during this phase, we were at this point where we still believed that tweaking techniques, making techniques, improvement in techniques will lead to exponential gains in our timing, which it did. So I don't know if you understand this or if you have experienced this, but in the very beginner levels of a sport, every small little technical improvements we make, every small little things we learn and we improve, we actually improve our standards or our grades by leaps and bounds. Say, for example, I guess the best example I can give is climbing, right? So let's say if you move between French grading, I don't know if you know French grading, but I know French grading, so I'm using that. So if you move from 5C to 6A, 6B, 6C, all the way to 7A, it improves very fast. You can gain that kind of improvement very fast just by learning how to do certain moves, drop knee, heel hook, toe hook, those kind of moves, or how to manage a sloper, how to manage a jug, how to manage do crims and crosses and everything. Learning these techniques allows you to improve grades, jump up grades very fast. But as you reach 7A, 7B, 7C, it takes forever for you to move up a single grade, a fraction of a grade. It grinds to a halt. You have to apply a lot of grit. You have to work very hard. You have to do all this little boring stuff like train every day and things like that. So at that time, we were still very new and, making small technical tweaks allowed us to improve our timing. And we kept teaching our paddlers, or we kept discovering new tweaks in techniques that we can, that we hopefully can bring us further. And there was a method at that time. There was a method that we adapted. So we moved from a very traditional stroke we call the hinge stroke, where it's just like you reach out to the front and you pull, sit up, sit down, sit up, sit down. It's a very clamshell kind of pull. To there was a time when we saw the Thai team competed in Penang that season before. It was really a bunch of kids, and they were paddling, and so happened we also stumbled upon a coach, a Thai national coach, who just casually taught us how their stroke works. It was a rotation stroke, and during that time, most of the people were using hinge strokes, and we were just discovering the rotation stroke. We got a couple of videos which we replayed over and over and over again, dissecting every single fraction of it to understand the technique. And we found the Thai stroke to be exceptionally elegant. It employs a kind of sport science or physics that is completely different from what all the other teams are using, even until today. Because a lot of teams, what they do is they just apply power, right? So in order for you to be strong, you just got to be powerful. And some even use stroke rates to determine how powerful they are, which means that the higher the stroke rate equals the faster the boat. But Thais do things very differently. So I don't know what name they have for it, but we call it the glide. So we adapted the glide. Of course, I'm not going to share the secrets here, but so we were able to theoretically identify and practice find the glide. And on good days, at that time, on good days, we were able to get the glide. And when we could get the glide, we could achieve faster speeds with lower stroke rates compared to others. So if you can imagine a video, right, of us paddling with some other team, we can have a stroke rate which is half of the team next to us, but we have a faster top speed than they had. But during that time, because it was so hard to learn it, it was very accidental. On good days, when we get it right, we could win heats. But on bad days, we would struggle so badly, and we didn't know how to recreate it. It was really tough. Coming back to the Putrajaya race. So the purpose of this race was actually to test new techniques, come back with findings. So we had a lot of new stuff they wanted to test. And what better way to test it than in an actual race, right? So our ultimate goal at that point was still to learn as much as we can. And we take it over to Singapore, which is going to happen a few months later. Because the purpose was set this way, right? I told the team, this is our direction. And the team was like, okay, we're just going to do testing, right? Nobody had any expectations to chase after podium. The lineups were built very, very balanced. There was no lineup that was specifically for winning or anything. In all intents and purposes, we were not equipped mentally, physically for competition. We were just there to try stuff, learn stuff. The competition during that day turned out to be pretty interesting, more interesting than we originally anticipated. There were a lot of great competitors. And something happened. We found ourselves in a position with opportunity. There was an opportunity for us to compete with them. We know we can do well. We know we can compete. And I was suddenly faced with a dilemma. To learning in a sense that to experiment on the stroke, or to win that race. No, I wasn't. At that point of time, I did not even have that awareness level yet. After the heat stage, right, I realized that we had a chance at the podium, and my mental state completely switched 180. I saw a chance, right? We saw a chance, but there were a few problems. So, like I said, the lineups were balanced. The paddlers had no determination to fight. So that frustrated me to no end, because they knew they had the opportunity, but they did not fight hard enough to reach the finals. Some of them just got complacent and just wanted to have fun and enjoy the time. So it really got to me. And one of the bigger problems is that we could not recreate the glide at will. We cannot snap our fingers and allow it to happen. So after 30 strokes, right, we usually would just like sputter and lose power in midfield. And it would actually get worse in the final quarter of the race set, where we really struggled. There was no power at all. So at one point, I lost my cool. I knew we could do better. And I know that they know they could do better. And I knew that we could go further if we just try harder. So there was a lot of pressure, and I applied the pressure onto them, and they applied the pressure onto each other. They couldn't keep sync. They were blaming each other for all sorts of small little issues during debrief. So I brought everyone together. During a briefing, I lost my temper. I threw my sunglasses on the floor, and it broke into little pieces. And then I yelled at them, and I asked this question. I said, "All I asked for was one perfect set. Is that so hard to give?" And there was silence. And during that point, I I don't think I understood it at that point, but it turns out perfection is nearly impossible to give. That's why it's called perfection. Everybody chase for it, and nobody can ever reach perfection because you can keep nitpicking on small little things and you will never be able to achieve perfection. It doesn't exist. So I was so overcome with my own drive that I forgot why we were there in the first place. I forgot that I am not competing in a solo sport. Because in a solo sport, I can change my mind on my direction at any time, and I can just decide whether to give up or move forward, to switch, to pivot on the fly just like that. But in a team sport, if the direction has been given, it's like turning a bus versus turning a bike, let's say. So it takes a lot of effort to turn a bus, and it turns slower. You have to preempt everything in it. You have to make plans ahead of time. And sometimes if you make the decision too late, you crash the bus. At the end of the race, only one boat made it to podium because we just somehow managed to glide, and we found ourselves in a podium. All the other boats got eliminated at the final stage. Some didn't even get through past the rapid charge as well. Looking back, I think the greatest loss was from my end. The race was supposed to be for data collection and for learning, but I I let my personal ambition and let my personal ego lead the team into a different place for everyone else. It would have been different if I was competing alone. I had no one else to be accountable for but myself. But it's different with the team. I I learned a very, very, very important lesson that day, which, to be honest, I kept making the same mistakes over and over after that anyway. But anyway, that was the first time I discovered this thing. And sometimes you just have to fall down a few times in order to realize that, hey, I can't keep doing this. It just, you have to change the way you do change the way you do something in order for the result to change. The ego of living up to the team's past also got in the way of playing the longer game. I was so engrossed with maintaining the reputation that we gained in Langkawi just the season before that I could not bear to lose face. I could not bear to be the person who caused Agonaga to not maintain that standard that is expected from everyone, especially our teammates. But I don't think at that point the teammates were even bothered because they knew what they were there for. It was me who lost my way. I also got in the way of playing the longer game. So there is this thing called the game theory, right? There's the finite game theory and there's the infinite game theory. So the finite game theory is the one where you set goals and you fight for the short term. It's always like season after season. You fight, you max out for the season. But playing the infinite game theory is the one where you are playing for the longer duration, the longer game. You are playing for a bigger vision. You are planning longer. You are planning for bigger things. So in this instance, we cannot allow every single race to be the race that we have to win. We have to be clear to ourselves that we are ready to lose everything in this small race in order to learn everything we can so that we can have a better chance in the race that actually matters, right? It's like losing the battle to win the war. It's a Sun Tzu art of war thing, which totally makes sense. At the end, those who signed up for a fun weekend ended up stressed out, and nobody had fun. And, it was all because of me. I understand that now that the paddlers need a safe space to make mistakes and learn, because whenever we win, we never ask ourselves, how did we win and why did we win? Right? Oh, we win, we just celebrate and everything and, just, go and have fun. We don't debrief it properly, everything is perfect. But it's always when we lose It's always when we lose or make mistakes. That is when we ask ourselves, what went wrong? How can we change it? And how can we better ourselves in the next run? The paddlers need patient coaches to help them objectively work on their weaknesses constructively. They got none of that day. They did not get a safe space to make mistakes and learn. They did not get a place where they can objectively work on their weaknesses constructively. All they got was just this crazy hot head that just demanded everything out of them all of a sudden, and they have no idea what the hell was going on. During the entire time, two things happened. The captain and the head coach at the time did not interfere. He just stood aside and he allowed the whole thing to happen. Had he taken over and interfered, I may not have been able to learn this valuable lesson. I think this was a good reflection as well, because sometimes you need to let people fall down, get hurt, in order for them to learn. Because if you're always there building fences around them and taking care of them, they are not able to learn the important lessons. And that also includes putting the paddlers in a position where they feel stressed out. Had I not learned that, I may have gone on to make the same mistake again, probably in bigger race arena, which would have cost us a lot more. So he allowed me to learn and to grow from this, which was a good thing. Second very important thing happened was the team didn't actually blame me for losing my temper, but instead made fun of the situation immediately right after the race. So they said that the next time they could actually go to Daiso and buy a huge load of sunglasses for me to keep breaking every single race, when I lose my temper. And I kind of like that they reminded me not to take myself so seriously. They just, chalked this whole thing up as it's a situational thing. They understood that these things happen and they didn't take things personally. And I appreciated that, and I found it to be like same thing, right? Me giving them space to objectively work on their weaknesses, and I was also given a space to objectively work on my weaknesses. When these spaces are given, we can grow without judgment. And when we grow without judgment, I think we can see things more constructively. We can see things more objectively. We don't feel offended by small little stuff. And I think that was good. So I learned that day to always be steadfast at the goals I communicate to the team. That's it. It happened again a few times, which I don't know. Sometimes I just get carried away. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of people do that as well. And it's good that the more times I'm faced with situations like this, the more awareness I have. Sometimes so this first time I totally didn't get it until after. Then there was one time after that, twice actually after that, it just happened like right in the middle of it. So I was able to catch myself and check myself right on the, And it was good to have, on the later stage, it was good to have assistant coaches and people who are trusted to be able to like just, knock me on the head and say, hey, you're doing this again. Remember why we are here. So I learned also not to be swayed by competition, focus inwards for continual growth. There was a lot of time when we always look outwards, like we want to compete with. I mean, this is what all athletes do, right? The first thing we do is we find a target behind someone's back and we chase after that target. And usually it's the ones that we are very, very close with, like, we're like maybe half a second apart, 1 second apart, those kind of stuff. And we feel very nice when we win, and we always give ourselves excuses when we lose. But eventually, we move on to challenging ourselves, our own timing, and we also move on to challenging teams that are beyond reach. Because we believe that when we reach for the moon, the worst that can happen, if we don't reach it, we will still be among the stars. But we cannot reach for clouds because that's way too low. I mean, it is possible to reach for clouds in a short run, but it's not really a vision, is it? That day as well, I learned for the first time that we were no longer the underdogs, that we had a reputation to defend. It's one thing to scare the incumbents, the teams that they had the favorites, and then, suddenly appear in the podium. It is a completely different thing when you're already there and you have to defend that podium position. the pressure is very different, and it comes from behind, and it comes from all over. But what I did was I shouldered the role too personally, and I took it too heavily on myself, which I shouldn't, but I guess most people would as well. It's a learning curve. And for that, thank you, Argonauts, for teaching me to leave my ego aside, to play the infinite game theory instead of the finite game theory, and to always be ready to lose a battle in order to win the war. So that is it for this week's episode of Dragon Ball Dynasty. You can catch all the episodes of this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and soon even more as well. I will see you on the next one. Bye.